Cadillac is the setting of one of the most intriguing driver head-to-heads in F1 in 2026. And while part of the reason for that is that there haven't been a whole lot of new driver pairings for 2026 outside of the Red Bull family, this still stands to be a pretty interesting matchup. And part of the reason why is that I think it could be a really legacy-defining pairing in terms of Bottas and Perez, as it could define, their legacies, how we think about them after their careers are done, but also for two of their former teammates. So of course, for Cadillac as a new team, there's not a whole lot to talk about in terms of past success, past years. But they do have two very experienced drivers, so that will be, I think, from my perspective at least, two of the more interesting aspects to look at when it comes to this team. So introducing their two drivers for 2026, of course, Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas. Now, these are two drivers who have been on the F1 grid for a very long time, with many years of experience between them. For Perez and Bottas, both coming into this season 36 years of age. I think Bottas is a year older, but he has a late birthday. Now, for Perez, of course, from Mexico, Bottas from Finland. For Perez, this is his 15th season F1, and for Bottas, it's his 13th. In terms of starts, it's one of the most experienced lineups on the grid. 281 starts for Perez, 246 for Bottas. And when you look at points and some other stats like poles and podiums, the stats are actually very similar. So for point, Perez 1,638, for Bottas 1,797. And they both have a career best in the Drivers' Championship of second, Perez achieving that in 2023, and for Bottas achieving that in 2019 and 2020. Now, of course, for both these drivers, I think even regardless of how their stints at Cadillac go, they will generally be remembered for being the number two drivers, two of the best drivers of all time in the form of Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, respectively. Now, when you look at wins, poles, podiums, that kind of thing, the stats are also very similar here. So for Perez, he has 6 wins, 3 poles, and 39 podiums in his career. For Bottas, a little bit better in every category, 10 wins, 20 poles, and 67 podiums. Bottas was at Mercedes, I think, one year longer than Perez, and could be argued that he had slightly better cars. Again, that's probably a matter of debate, but still interesting to see that the numbers are relatively close, but Bottas generally a little bit ahead of the Mexican on most of those stats. Now, when you look at some of my advanced stats, I like to keep track of that I make myself. For points above expected, despite the fact that Perez generally has a reputation of being better of the two in Grand Prix performances, Bottas is the one with a higher career points above expected of 89%. So basically getting 89% of the points he would be expected to get based on his starting position, strength of car, that kind of thing. And for Perez, only 84%, so again, not great, but those 4 years at Red Bull would have definitely hurt Perez's numbers in a lot of categories, as they would have hurt his numbers for his quality rating and his race rating. These numbers are calculated against drivers who have relatively similar machinery, not just against their teammates. So for Perez, his career age and experience adjusted quality rating is negative 0.034, which ranks 37th. Bottas, though, is a bit better, negative 0.282, which ranks 16th all time since 1995. And so for Bottas, he's kind of in that borderline elite range, whereas for Perez, he's a little bit above average. Now, for race rating, this is where things get a little bit tricky. I think, again, like I said, most people would generally rate Perez above Bottas in terms of Grand Prix performance, things like tire management. Bottas is known for not being a great wheel-to-wheel racer, but interestingly, Bottas does come out on top here, and I think some of that might have to do with the fact that Perez's career totals got submarined quite a bit by his time being up against Max Verstappen. But for Perez, negative 0.066, which ranks 65th, so a little bit below average, and for Bottas, 0.006, a hair above average for him, and he ranks 55th. Since this is a new team, I thought I would take the opportunity to introduce some of the key personnel off track with the Cadillac F1 team. So in terms of their bases, they actually have quite a few. So based on what their Wikipedia page says, it's kind of hard to pick out which one is their official base, but they do list 4. Fishers, Concord, and Warren all in the United States, and then Silverstone in the UK. So we'll see which ones comes out as the main base, but for now I decided to include all 4 of those. Team principal is Graham Loudon, and for those of you who've been watching F1 for a longer period of time, you might remember him from his time being team principal of Marussia. And so again, he knows how to run a slower team, a team towards the back of the grid. So hopefully he can have more success with Cadillac than he did with Marussia. Chief Technical Officer Nick Chester, someone who's been involved with F1 for a long time. And then for engine, they will be, of course, using Ferrari engines until 2029, with the expectation is they will start using their own engines, which is kind of part of the deal that allow Cadillac to join the F1 grid in the first place. And of course, that's kind of a video on its own. But again, a little bit of an odd sight seeing one car manufacturer in Cadillac using the engines of a completely different one. Now, when we look at predictions for this season, I think obviously in terms of the car, based on what we've seen so far from Barcelona Shakedown, the expectation is this is going to be one of the slowest cars on the track, at least to start, and I would expect that to continue for all of 2026 and maybe even into 2027. I think from the Barcelona Shakedown, they were generally it seems like they were about a second or so, perhaps slower than the next slowest team. And again, you can't read too much into these times from testing the shakedowns and stuff, but I think that's kind of lines up with where things are. And I think we're more likely going to see something like the teams from early 2010, where they were very, very slow, rather than something like Haas in 2016. Haas, of course, using the Ferrari approach, bought as many Ferrari parts as they could, where it seems like Cadillac is trying to do everything in-house. And while I think they're probably going to be better, Cadillac team is probably going to be much better off long-term than your HRTs, Lotus, or Virgin. I do think that this year is going to be pretty tough. I do think even scoring points is going to be a pretty tall ask. Now, when we look at predictions for their drivers, finishing up this video, like I said, I think this is going to be a really interesting season. It could be potentially legacy defining for both their drivers. It will be really interesting to see how the former number 2 drivers for both Hamilton and Verstappen stack up against each other. But based on my quality rating, race rating, these are kind of the numbers that have been spat out. So for qualifying, I think the expectation that Bottas is going to out-qualify Perez, and my numbers kind of back that up, I should say. Bottas expected to out-qualify Perez by a median qualifying gap of 0.182 seconds. Again, I think that's maybe a little bit high, but I think it's definitely within the realm of possibility. When you look at race results, pretty close here as well. Hypothetically, if this team were to get 500 points, which I think most people would agree is probably not going to happen, but I just did this to be consistent. If the team were hypothetically to get 500 points, Bottas would get 51.4%, and Perez would get the remaining 48.6%. And that would translate to about a 14-point difference. So you can imagine, in reality, when this team is probably going to score no points, or maybe 1 or 2 points at best, things are likely going to be very, very close between these 2 drivers. It'll be interesting to see how it translates. In terms of their contracts, I believe both drivers are on multi-year contracts. There are already some rumblings that the team is trying to get Colton Herta into the frame to become a Cadillac driver in the coming years. He has, of course, moved over from IndyCar to Formula 2 for 2026, and potentially when, in a couple of years' time, when they decide to either retain only one of the 2 drivers or drop both of them, Herta might be in the frame for a Cadillac seat if his time in Formula 2 goes well. But that's all for my preview for Cadillac's 2026 F1 season. It should be a very exciting season for the new team, and I'm interested to see how it plays out. But thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.